All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be presenting a very intriguing topic, something that everybody still wants to learn a lot about and how they can better protect themselves. We're going to talk a lot about ransomware and cloud-based backup disaster recovery. We've also got some folks from Veeam that I'll introduce here in a second. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products for PhoenixNAP. And on the line, I have Brandon McCoy, Cloud Sales Engineer at Veeam. Thank you for joining us today, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's kind of just dive right in. You know, I think the reason that everyone's here is that it has become imminently aware to most organizations that ransomware is very important to protect yourself against. And obviously, ransomware is only a single class of virus or malware. It's only one specific type of thing that can happen to your critical IT environment. But it's a very important one, not only the damage that can do, but the loss of data that can occur and the speed at which it can affect a lot of different machines and make them unusable. It's interesting to note, and I think I'll start with the kind of non-scare tactic here to some extent, is, we're actually seeing ransomware start to kind of decline, except in the largest enterprises. And I think what that means and what we read into that, the data coming from Symantec, is that when we look at ransomware attacks, honestly, what's happening is the attackers are getting better at targeting the people that they truly think will give them money. And a lot of times that's due to just preparedness. Enterprises have data pretty much everywhere. They don't always have a backup of that one server over there that they forgot to do a backup of, or have some type of protection mechanism in place. They're also more willing to kind of stay out of the headlines and potentially cooperate and pay. Those as well, I think we've seen a huge rise from a city government, a SLED perspective with ransomware attacks. So be a very, very important. I think that a lot of times it really comes down to a misconfiguration. These guys are still, spraying and praying to some extent. They're looking for anything on the internet that they can connect to, get into, and start to really wreak havoc inside those environments. And they're starting to kind of really get good at finding their way into these enterprises and into these SMB companies, right? And sometimes it starts with some type of email downloader attack. Sometimes it starts with some type of phishing, expedition, whether that's, not only email, but potentially through calls or verbal communication, especially in larger enterprises where people don't know, who everyone is. So they're trying to kind of, it says 1-2 punch here. I think it's a good way of putting it. 1-2 punch their way in to getting the type of malware that can encrypt machines and make them unusable, and specifically ransomware in this case. So when you look at what it means to your organization, what does this mean to you? And I think that's why you're here. If you look at not only the damage that occurred from a data loss perspective, if you don't pay the ransom, the average cost of paying ransom sometimes, depending on what organization you work for, the ForgeRock data basically put the average at $133,000 per attack. So it's a pretty significant cost, and especially when you look at that average being applied to smaller organizations at times, that $133,000, may be a really large part of that organization's funds, and it can potentially put them out of business. As you start to climb up in terms of the exposure and risk and the cost of repair and analysis, you get things like City of Baltimore and the National Health Service last or year before last, where you can get into hundreds of millions of dollars, right? It truly can happen. City of Baltimore is not the only one. City of Atlanta, I think about last year paid out to get out of a ransomware attack. And the reality of that is it isn't necessary. Preparedness can make a big difference in your ability to recover from these and other types of attacks that you face on the market today. And obviously, as your service is down, you really start to pay the price in terms of whether your customers are confident in your ability to protect their data, but also confident in your ability to keep the service that you provide them online and available. So I think giving you guys some practical ways to handle these. Some of these are going to be kind of no-brainers, but I think it's important to kind of walk through some of these things and leveraging tools to be able to tell you what's been compromised. Let me log into every machine and see which one is telling me I need to pay the money. It's probably not a good idea. And there's a lot of systems, a lot of tool sets can tell you this type of information, usually because they'll become unresponsive. It'll show up as being, unresponsive either from a network perspective, from a remote access perspective. So I'm not going to really dive into how that's done, but needless to say, most modern IT tool sets would tell you that something's wrong with that machine. So you need to really figure out what's going on there. Finding ways to get those systems offline as quickly as possible is really important, because the only way for the ransomware to continue to wreak havoc and move throughout an organization is through network introspection and finding assets that can be vulnerable. Some pieces of ransomware lately specifically have become extremely violent in their capabilities, and you may not be able to get to them in time, right? They may, in fact, just be unavoidably spread. What you should be doing, not only once you identify these machines and actually block out network access to those infected systems, but you should also be really focusing on your east-west security policy. So I'm not sure how many of you guys are using modern software-defined networking capabilities. Anything that provides microsegmentation is a good best practice to try to keep stuff like this from spreading like wildfire through your organization. And I think, with our friends at Veeam here kind of helping us out and talking about this topic today, I think it's important to mention, and very, sometimes not so well understood, that just knowing that you have a secure copy of your data that is not infected or has not been compromised by a network share or other type of capability of your data is important. And sometimes getting out of ransomware is as simple as just blowing away sets of machines or a machine and restoring to the last known good backup, right? And that can quickly keep you out of a really sticky situation, one that could lead to either you losing your data or you paying a ransom, which, by the way, we absolutely don't recommend. As an organization, as PhoenixNAP, as Veeam, we collectively don't recommend that you pay ransoms, specifically because of what I said here. It's just not a guarantee that you're going to get your data back. You're going to send them cryptocurrency, and then maybe, right? Maybe you do, maybe you won't. And the next time, once they know that you'll pay, the next time you get hit by one, it's going to be more. It's going to be a lot more, right? And it just doesn't end well for your organization. So highly recommend against that. Much cheaper typically to just work on protecting yourself. Not to mention that protection comes with so many other benefits other than just ransomware, right? Because there's so many other ways for your data to fall ill or be compromised, right? And you need to make sure you're in a really good position to be able to recover from those types of incidents. And so when I look at what you can do to protect yourself, what can you do to make your organization more resilient and your services more highly available? This is the stuff that everyone knows they should be doing, right? It's your standard antivirus, endpoint protection. It's your truly least privileged firewall and network access control mechanisms, making sure that you have the ability to quickly understand events that are happening on other systems and having a searchable way to get to information. We talked about system monitoring and alerting. And I put disaster recovery as a service here just to keep it succinct, but a lot of times, and it depends on the organization, what that means to you. Cloud DR or disaster recovery as a service can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And so as I talk about it, in the realms of this conversation, I'm talking about either an offsite copy of your data, an offsite backup, or an actual disaster recovery as a service or cloud DR service that you can leverage to recover an entire environment as a collective entity very quickly. And I'll talk a little bit more about which applies to which later as we move through the conversation. So, I think as it pertains to ransomware protection, we look at cloud disaster recovery. Had a nice auto advance there. We look at cloud DR to make sure that your data is available 24/7, right? And it's important that you have the ability to recover the latest version of your data and really minimize the disruptions that you guys see in your environment. And so when you look at offsite backup and you look at cloud DR, these are some of the ways that you can protect yourself. And why? Why do you want to choose cloud DR over doing it yourself, right? I think that's the other big conversation that a lot of people want to have is, why should you look at offsite backup from a service provider or as a service versus doing everything yourself, buying 2 of everything or slightly less than 2 of everything, buying an extra array to sit in the data center somewhere. And the reality is it kind of comes down to these couple of areas, right? So you look at the cost of building and constructing an actual DR environment, doing everything yourself, the CapEx of 2 sets of pretty much everything, licensing for everything. It just doesn't make sense typically, especially if you look at, you have to really understand the overhead that comes with managing those types of environments and keeping them around, potentially never to use them. It's a very, very expensive insurance policy at that point. So you want to look at kind of eliminating some of those things. Being able to put environments up that can cater to the size and the geographic region of what your organization needs, I think is also very important, right? You may have an East Coast and West Coast office. You may want to DR, your East Coast to the West Coast, your West Coast to the East Coast. You may want to have your European entity have a disaster recovery location only inside of Europe. Now you're talking about a lot of overhead, right? You've got to build a DR 3 DR locations in that scenario, and you've got to manage them all independently, and you got to take care of all that. Where there are providers, not just us, but providers out there that can give you a turnkey solution globally, right? Distributed and multi-solution oriented, right? Where you can have offsite backup, you can have something for your Veeam environment, you can have something for your Microsoft native database replication environment. You can have all kinds of different solutions working together to make sure that you have a highly available business and that you're ready for attack, all with no upfront CapEx. That's truly what it comes down to. That's the idea around cloud-based disaster recovery. Don't spend a dime up front, pay for what you need, and pay for the compute for what you need only when you need it. And I think that's the other major capability of cloud DR. Everybody gets to share the same insurance policy, basically. So it truly does lower the cost of ownership of deploying something like that. And then, really best of breed solutions, right? Being able to get yourself a real-time copy of your data, something that has multiple restore point capabilities, something that can really help you out in the event that you face some type of major malware or ransomware attack. All right, so why is Veeam here? And I'm going to transition this over to my buddy Brandon in just a second. But first, I want to talk about, what makes Veeam special when it comes to delivering on the promise of cloud-based backup and SaaS recovery, right? So since version 9, you've been able to do both offsite backup and offsite replication of your data to an integrated service provider that can give you a Veeam optimized experience, one that can cater to the exact policies that you create on premises and deliver them as a cloud-based service, right? Something that you can stand up in, it says hours, but you can stand it up in minutes, honestly. You go into your environment on your prem, you click buttons, you set up your DR plan, and you test failover and you test your replication capability. It may take a lot more time to get your data over somewhere. It may take a lot more time to really test your application, resiliency. But having that DR site up and having data replication started can be done in minutes to hours. And I think that time to protection is extremely important. That ability, like I said, a compatible environment, that ability to really replicate your network environment in the DR target is also really important. Making sure that your security policies aren't falling down the moment that you fail over to the DR target is extremely important. And having that available in as many places as possible that to really cater to your business. And today we're offering backup in many more locations, but if you want to get the whole solution, you want to get disaster recovery and backup, we're providing that in Asia Pac, East Coast US, West Coast US, and Europe. And unfortunately, for those of you out there that are using Hyper-V, we can support you from an offsite backup perspective, but we're not providing native Hyper-V replication capabilities as a service today. And really, as we look towards the future and we see Microsoft and Azure Stack and Azure kind of building their own proprietary solutions, it's just not something that we've really had to put a lot of time and effort into. And we find that a lot of organizations that use Hyper-V don't actually have enough funding or want to pay for a DR, and offsite backup is just good enough for them. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw out a poll right now so that everyone can kind of think about this the stuff that we've talked about. Try to think about where you're at as an organization, and how your organization is ready to deal with these types of attacks. And I'm going to transition this over to Brandon and let him kind of take it from there. Give me one second. Can you guys still hear me? Brandon, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. The poll has locked up my machine, so here we go. All right. I'm gonna do, and you guys are seeing the poll. Let's see, we're getting those votes coming in. 38% voted. I'm gonna let it go to like 50%. Doesn't look like I can actually continue the presentation until we close the poll. So that's kind of interesting. And for those of you on the phone, if you haven't voted yet, click in the poll area and choose one of these options so that we can go. All right, so we've got a good quorum here. I don't know if it's going to leave the poll open. I'm going to give the keyboard over to Brandon, cloud sales engineer at Veeam. He's going to talk a little bit about Veeam specific solutions that are available when you purchase Veeam and use it on premises. All right, Brandon, can you take control there?
Let's take a look here. So
looks like it's off air until we close the poll.
Yeah.
All right. So. Okay, so here you go, Brandon. We've got that poll, and I'll talk a little bit about it as soon as Brandon's done.
Okay, thanks a lot, William, and thanks everyone for joining. That was very informative stuff. And so I just want to kind of supplement that with some Veeam information here. to kind of tell you, why Veeam is a good solution, in addition to PhoenixNAP, for some different, there we go, for some different resources for remediation and recovery. Being proactive as well, right? So a lot of times we're reactive to these kinds of ransomware attacks, but it's also good to be proactive with reports and whatnot. So let's start with how do you know you have a good copy, right? So I hope that most people nowadays do have some sort of backup in place. I'm sure there's a few out there that don't, but anybody who values their data, I'm sure has some sort of backup. But just having a backup isn't always enough. We do see ransomware strains that encrypt backups, delete backups, that specifically target backups. So it's good to have that 3-2-1 where you have multiple copies of your data, one offsite at a PhoenixNAP secure location in case something happens to your building or your backup repositories. And it's also good to have different kinds of media. So in the slide here, we see your production environment gets locked up and you're hit with a ransomware demand to pay, usually via Bitcoin. And you go to do a restore from your backup repository. That repository could also be locked down. Those backups could be encrypted. We sometimes do see ransomware strains that look for specific file extension names that are very common to backup. So what do you do in that scenario? Before you restore from a corrupted backup, or you already realize that your repository has been infected? Well, there's two things you can do. In terms of knowing that you have a good copy, you can use Veeam's on-demand sandbox and Sure Backup feature. Now, we can do these from one of two things. We can either use the backup storage. So before doing that restore, what we can do is we can spin up this isolated network, restore the VMs into this network, and do a verification to make sure that that backup can be restored, and we can do this without affecting production. So matter of fact, this slide is a little bit older than some of our brand new features. We now also offer the ability to run an antivirus software scan inside of this on-demand sandbox before you restore it. So just providing even more assuredness that you'll be okay when you do that restore. And doing it from those storage snapshots as well. So if you do find out that your backup is corrupted from a Veeam perspective, you could use one of your SAN vendors' storage snapshots that we have integration with to do a crash consistent restore and at least be able to get the bulk of your data back in case your repository was hit. Okay. Bear with me here, just getting a little lag on the transition of the slides. There we go. Okay, so if we do find that we have hopefully at least one good restore point, maybe not from the backups, but at least from the storage snapshots, we can go back within the Veeam software and look at those different snaps as they were taken and choose what we want to get out. We also have the ability to restore the whole machine or maybe just specific data. On the bottom here, you see these Veeam Explorers. So Veeam does have integration at the higher levels of our licensing in Enterprise Plus with some specific storage SAN vendors. We have a large list on our website of which SAN vendors that we integrate with, but we're able to not only restore from these storage snapshots the entire machine, but also do things like restore users back into Active Directory, right? Restore emails back into Exchange. And these things come up a lot when you think of ransomware, not from just an external perspective, but also from an internal. When you think of malicious employees departing companies or even accidental deletions. There was a story of a Veeam customer, luckily, who had a directory services administrator who was on their way out the door. Before they left, they decided to scramble the board, so they moved everybody into different containers, changed their names, passwords, permission, and the company couldn't figure out what was going on. They were locked out of everything. They couldn't do their job. So rather than having to restore whole machines, which could take hours of downtime and man hours, they were able to just open up these Veeam Explorers for the Active Directory, view what changes were made, and just click on those unwanted changes and revert them back, saving a whole lot of time. So these are some really good options for restoring of not just the whole machine, but of specific items to get back up and running quickly. Oops.
Still not billing out. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, being able to restore the whole machine or just what was infected. Maybe you had some specific files. Maybe you just need to restore some applications. For instance, you may have some SQL database that had been corrupted, and that's what you need back, right? Some kind of EPR system or something like that. We could take that Oracle database, restore to even before an object occurred into that SQL database from both the backup targets locally and offsite, as well as your storage snapshots. So just giving you a whole bunch of options of what you want to restore, how you want to restore it. We also see here some offline tape storage. Another great option, tape is 100% offline air gap solution. It's not always the best for fast recoveries. It's just files. It's a little bulky, clunky, going to take a little longer to restore, but it's always a good last resort just in case you need something. And then, of course, one of my favorite ways to do restores is from the Cloud Connect backups offsite in case something were to happen on-prem. And so finally, I mentioned being proactive rather than reactive. So Veeam One, it's a monitoring and reporting tool that Veeam offers, and it has a whole lot of built-in alarms. It actually has a ransomware monitoring alarm, which will look for high CPU utilization and data store read-write spikes, and you can determine what's considered abnormal there. So maybe you see some unusual writes occurring. You can then, take that machine off the network, quarantine it, and go find out what's going on, run a script against those machines. Lots of really cool things. But also being able to know that you're protected in case something happens. So having customizable reports of how many copies of your backups do you have? Do you have copies in local and offsite storage? Are you able to go back to X number of days, something we call recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives, right? So making sure that you can meet SLAs in case something does happen, you'll know that you'll be fully protected. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it back off to William, and I appreciate your time.
All right, Brandon, thank you so much for everything. I wanted to give everybody a little bit of feedback on the poll. We get 20% of the respondents said that they have DR as a service and they feel 100% prepared. So for those guys, awesome. 56% said they're looking to improve. That's pretty typical, I would say, in terms of a lot of folks out there know they have a problem. They're working on it. They've got it budgeted for next year, and they're kind of moving through the paces there. 21% of folks responded that they were, looking at, whether, from a research perspective, whether they were ready to implement, might not be ready there. And then only 3% said you're interested in us, which is fine, right? We're here to give you guys education. I know a lot of you guys are still just kind of looking at the concept of having an offsite copy of your data, one that you don't control the infrastructure that it sits on, and especially cloud-based disaster recovery, which is a very intimate decision for an organization, right? Because you need to make sure that provider can really be a good fit for your organization. And so why do we think PhoenixNAP is a good fit? I think it really starts with our breadth of service, the different ways that we can help you with your offsite backup and disaster recovery needs. We love Veeam. We use Veeam everywhere, but it's not our only solution, right? Sometimes the best way to protect a Oracle database is to do Oracle database replication, right? Sometimes the way to protect a different application is to have just infrastructure with application replication, right? And data resiliency in that perspective. And especially as we look towards cloud native applications, we're having to help customers with all kinds of different things. And having that breadth of capability and the really proven track record of delivering on those promises is really important. And then tying that into being able to do some or all of those capabilities in many different locations across the globe. So when we look at where today we're offering services, anything that doesn't say network pop, right? We're offering as many of the services as we have in those locations ready for people to consume on demand. And so I think that's something that is unique in the industry today, and being able to provide that level of service. So what do we have, and why do we think it's amazing, right? So, from a Veeam perspective, we offer two flavors of their Cloud Connect product. We offer an offsite backup capability that is as easy as putting in a URL, a username and password, and getting started. And one thing I wanted to mention is I had all you guys on here. I hope many of you are Veeam customers, but right now, if you log into myveeam.com, you can actually get 1 terabyte free of Cloud Connect backup from us for an entire year. And all you have to do is go find the banner that, it says claim my 1 TB free. You click on it, choose PhoenixNAP, and off you go. You get a username and password immediately, you get set up immediately, and you get a terabyte of offsite data protection for an entire year. And if you ever want to upgrade that, you ever want to talk to us about replication, we're happy to be there to help you with that. We do offer truly kind of full service disaster recovery capabilities, multi-technology, multi-discipline. We're working on and delivering on the promise of software as a service and protecting you from the data damage that will one day occur in those environments. And whether you do it, an admin does it, or the provider does it, one of those major SaaS services is going to have massive data corruption one day. And there's going to be a lot of people out there really scratching their heads about why they treated the SaaS data service differently than when they had it on-prem. And so I think it's important. We started with backup for Office 365 and the SharePoint, OneDrive capabilities, the email capabilities, and we're moving into offering other different technologies, not only as Veeam adds them, but as other providers in our portfolio add them. Kind of the last thing I want to mention is if you're done doing this yourself, if you're done, building your own environments, managing your own environments, taking care of everything all day long, and instead you want to focus on those apps, we're here for you. Our data security cloud offering is world-class. I've got 3 sessions at VMworld for those that are going to VMworld, talking about not just data security cloud, really not that at all, but about how we're working with the best vendors in the world to deliver unique and differentiating solutions to the market. And we're wrapping all of that up in our award-winning client portal, which is there for you guys to be able to change your resources, pay your bill, talk to support, etc. It's all right there for you at your fingertips. And so with that, I'm going to take questions. We are absolutely going to be sending out slides. So there are some handouts there that you can get where you, at the bottom, it's in the GoToWebinar thing at the bottom under handouts. You can download all those. We're going to be sending that out. Somebody asked what the URL for the 1 TB free offer is. If you log into my.veeam.com, log in with your Veeam credentials, there is, hey Brandon, you know exactly where it's at in Veeam.com?
I do not. I can try to look it up. I may have to reach out to our marketing team to find that out.
I'm pretty sure it's a banner there that says claim my 1 TB free offer. If not, reach out to your rep. They'll be able to get you in the right direction. And choose PhoenixNAP, get your credentials immediately, start protecting that data. It doesn't take a VPN. It doesn't take anything. You just go plug in your username and password, create a backup copy job, and you're done. So I think it's a pretty amazing solution. It's tried and true. The Cloud Connect backup capability has been there since late 2013. The Cloud Connect replication capability has been there since late 2014, early 2015. So there's been a lot of intellectual property and time in market for those products. Yep, somebody just did it for us. It's under my account and under the products tab there. Once you log in, go to my account and go under products. All right, I'm gonna give just a minute for any other questions that anyone has. I'm gonna put up the email here. If you have questions, you can hit up sales if you're interested in talking to them. If you just have a technical question, feel free to reach out to me. It's williamb@phoenixnap.com. I'd be happy to answer any of your technical questions. If you really want to understand how this might work for your business, I'll be able to do that. Yes, on the Cloud Connect perspective, I believe we are offering insider protection as of 9.5 U4 upgrade. So I'll double check on that, but I'm nearly 100% sure that we're offering that. There are some limitations to insider protection. Brandon, do you know those offhand? There's some. There are some
limitations for insider protection, just
yeah.
for the data itself. Yeah. So the way insider protection works is very similar to how our object storage works. You have to have what's a whole chain. So if you have like a full backup and the incremental chains that make it up, after you have then created another full, like a synthetic full, you can move the oldest chain off if it were to get deleted. So yeah, you just have to have an intact chain in order to be able to recover from that chain.
Yeah, and so for you guys out there, you know, pretty much as long as you're not doing forever forward, right, Brandon?
Yes, that's a better way to say it. Yeah, as long as you're not doing forever forward, you have a synthetic full every once in a while. Everything behind that synthetic full can be recovered from if it's deleted.
The other thing I would mention, I think it's worth mentioning for those that have stayed on, is that we're actually able to recover out of those offsite backups. It's not an easy process. It's not a quick process. But if you're looking for that just kind of dirty DR solution, we're going to be there for you, right? You know, we'll have to create everything from scratch. We'll have to build it all. But the reality is we have your data. If your your main data center, your main office burns down in a fire, we have it for you. So with that, I want to thank everybody so much for coming out and joining us. I hope this has been valuable. We've recorded the whole thing. I'm sure our teams will be reaching out with the recording, and we'll also make the slides available, and a member of our marketing team will make sure that the attendees get the slides. And for next time, we'll have them in the handouts area so everybody can take them away. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and I will have a good day. Sheldon, yes, we should show up under selected provider unless you're choosing Central. Today, we only show up on East Coast and West Coast. So if you want DR in the Central location, we won't have that for you until we have it available in Chicago soon. But if you choose East Coast or West Coast, then you should be able to have it. And if not, reach out to sales@phoenixnap.com and we'll hook you up with the same promotion. All right, guys, have